Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, September 21st. First, we take a look at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. Currently a rather benign pattern, weak low pressure in the Gulf, making some seas of no real interest. A stronger system off Kamchatka and south of the western Aleutians, but still nothing of real interest going on. A little bit of tropical activity here north of the Philippines, but generally a quiet pattern. That is to change significantly. Taking a look at the jet stream, that is winds up above 30,000 feet. These winds help support the formation of storms, and when they do form, help direct their tracks. What we have is a good, healthy, early season flow pushing off Japan. This is 130 knot winds pushing 140 knots over the date line, basically running flat to the east, and then a little bit of a trough here, a little bit of a dip to the south, and then a ridge building over internal west coast of the United States. This area here provides a little bit of support, and as we saw in the previous chart, a little bit of seas are being generated by presumably fetch that is being supported by this trough. But in general, what we're looking at here is the whole flow is generally down about 40 north, which is pretty far south for this time of year, but certainly some indications that perhaps some flavor of weak El Nino is helping to goose up the jet stream a little bit. We'll put this in motion. Notice what happens here as we start moving into Monday. Wind speeds pick up and this trough starts building here in the west. Nothing too dramatic, but then you get into Tuesday and you have a bona fide trough setting up here with 150 knot winds filling into it on Tuesday and then into Wednesday even. This is nice. That certainly would support gale development down at the ocean surface. Okay, and then somewhat of a ridge trying to protect the U.S. West Coast. Another trough also trying to get organized here off Kamchatka, and we're only into Wednesday. As we roll this out, this trough eventually, it actually holds together well into Thursday and then starts pushing inland, and the trough back here sort of dissipates, but still the whole flow holding together reasonably nicely down at 40 north. Looks like at least one gale is possible, at least from the jet stream levels situation. Then we get into the weekend, another trough, not quite as significant as one we saw earlier, and this is actually an upgrade from even yesterday. Another trough setting up in the Gulf, and yet another trough south of Kamchatka. We get into Saturday saying, look at this, so you got 150 knot winds in that one, and probably the better part of 130 knot winds supporting this one. And then we go into Sunday, and it's still in play. So, a great early season pattern already shaping up, and we're not out of the month of September yet. So then let's take a look at the surface. Let's see how the jet stream impacts or supports low pressure development down in lower levels of the atmosphere, specifically the surface. And this is where you want winds to be blowing to interact with the ocean, to create seas, and seas, of course, as they radiate away from the fetch area where wind is occurring, create swell, and swell, of course, generates surf. So currently, 12Z Sunday, we saw some small seas in the area in the eastern Gulf of Alaska. Sure enough, there's winds there, nothing significant, 15, 20 knots at best. But another low out just northwest of Hawaii, yet a third low trying to organize off Kamchatka. We put this into motion, and by into Monday, we already have gale force winds, 35 knot winds. Now notice, they're more pushed up towards Canada and not so much towards anywhere else. And notice the core of the low is already past Hawaii. So that pretty much takes them out of the mix. But by Monday afternoon already, 18Z, that's actually about 11 a.m. West Coast time, you have 40 knot winds developing, and that only goes up from there, 45 knots. And if you look real close, there's almost some 50 knot winds in there by Tuesday morning, and south of about 45 north, clearly all aimed right at the U.S. West Coast. This is a nice system if it were to happen. Nothing huge, nothing over the top, but a solid gale, if not a small storm for 6 hours or so. Continues into Wednesday and then starts moderating, petering out. Still 35 knot winds even into Wednesday and Thursday, and then it finally starts moving inland by Thursday night and pretty much over. High pressure tries to build in behind. Notice 15 knot winds here along south central California coast. Also some trades north of Hawaii in the 15, almost 20 knot range and building. So of course clearing high pressure behind the low, and then supposedly some sort of a tropical system off here to the west. Never believed the GFS model on tropical systems, but sometimes it sort of picks up, it does a pretty good job. Okay, so we're into Saturday, and then we have another, I call it a weak low pressure system. What was that, 20, 25 knot winds, but a real gale off Kamchatka. This would target Hawaii a reasonable amount. 40 knot winds aimed right at Hawaii, and then still this guy's trying to get going. The tropical system, if it were to occur, looks like it's covering a good amount of area, a good solid system. And then we're into Sunday night. That's the end of the model, but then we have one low, pretty sizable. Most of the fetch, actually let's go back and look at that. Most of the fetch, there's actually fetch there underneath the millibar tag, actually aimed at the U.S. West Coast, and it lifts north, and pretty much it's just a quick pass for this area. Much larger system behind that, tropical system here, theoretically another tropical system south of Cabo. So it looks like a very good fall pattern if one is to believe the models. Let's go take a look at the significant wave height chart. So back to the significant wave height chart. Now we're using the smaller chart here because we can actually overlay the Great Circle Pass and drill in, sort of figure out where swell would occur if these models are accurate. Where the other image that we showed at the lead off is a pretty picture, big, but it doesn't have some of the capabilities that this version does. So we put this into motion. There's our little low and the fetch. What is that, like 12-foot seas out of the picture. Here comes the new one here, and then one off Kamchatka. Put this into motion. Already we're into Monday afternoon, and we're looking at 22-foot seas. Here's the Northern California Great Circle Paths, 296 right there. So it aimed a little bit south of that, but not too bad. And relative to Southern California, kind of up there to the north, about 301 or so. Put it into motion, see where we go from there. 30, and we're into Tuesday morning. That's 30, 32 or so foot seas. We can actually zoom in and take a quick look there. And yeah, oh, actually 34-foot seas. Very tiny area though, so nothing to get too excited about. We'll put on the Great Circle Pass there, right on the 296-degree path. That's the core of that, and that's where the longest period energy will be generated. So 296 relative to Northern California, and a little north of the 301, probably about the 303 to Southern California, so find some spots that have good northern exposure there. Anyway, roll this out. It continues. It doesn't really go any further south in terms of the core fetch, but still, so basically Tuesday's the day in terms of swell generation. Then it moderates, but continues to produce some sort of activity, and then eventually just fades out. We roll it out. We're into Friday now looking. Here comes the next little mini system up here. We're not expecting much from this, and this tropical system is going this way, but another cold core low starts developing off Kamchatka. Put this into motion. The Kamchatka low, we're into 6C Sunday. That's about 11 p.m. on Saturday, a week out. 22, 4, 6 foot seas or so relative to Hawaii on the 312-degree path, and pushing well down that path, and we'll continue to put that out. Oh, and building 28-foot, good solid 28-foot seas relative to Hawaii on the 319-degree path, it looks like. So that's good for probably, if it were to occur, probably, 15, 16, probably 15-second period swell relative to Hawaii. And then this guy here, the one we saw earlier, it's pretty much outside of anything relative to Northern California or Central California for that matter. And we could roll this back now. See, the seas don't really get going until it's out of the swell window. But certainly for maybe Cape Mendocino northward, swell could result from that. And again, there's the two tropical systems that we see, but way too early to know what or if they're going to do anything at all. So things look pretty good for the North Pacific and early in the season. We're not focusing so much on the southern hemi, but there is a few systems of interest, so we'll just go right to the significant wave height charts. Mainly for Tahiti here, a little primer system starts on Monday morning. That's 26-foot seas, 28-foot seas relative to Tahiti. There you go. Like 229 or so degree path, 30-foot seas aimed up there, not so bad. And relative to Hawaii, Not so much, but probably some background swell for the islands. It's about the 189 degree path or so, and a larger system south there. Actually, let's put this back here, and we'll take a look at Northern California. That's the 215 degree path, 40-foot seas over a small area. That's unshadowed by Tahiti. So you got one, actually that's going into Northern California too, this little one. So you got two. I mean, that one, the first one's rather small though. And Southern California, the same deal. What is that? Hard to see. About 213, which is probably, we'll follow this right up here, it's moving into the shadow of Tahiti. So not so good. Anyway, and the system, so this one here is really a Tahiti and maybe Hawaii sort of swell generator. And then this other one here gets, you know, decent, but nothing outrageous. But it does reform, and relative to Southern California, here's the interesting part, is the shadow ends about right over here, and so we're into Thursday or so, and there's a good amount, look at that, just 32-foot seas, not pushing directly up the pass, but doing a pretty good job. So good for Southern California background, probably more than background, probably a decent southern hemi swell for Southern California. So whatever they don't get from the north, they'll get from the south about a week or so, 8 days later. Roll it out, and then things get pretty quiet in the south, and that's it. So let's go take a look at long-term projections. And this section of the forecast is all about El Nino, the development of it, what it's going to do, all that sort of stuff. Southern Oscillation Index, different in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Negative numbers over a long period of time suggest the formation of El Nino. Currently, the daily number, daily difference, minus 6.06. The 30-day average, holding steady now. Notice here's almost a month's worth of data, and it's just hovering right around minus 10, minus 9.65. And then the 90-day running average, that's 3 months, minus 8.08. This is really good news. This is suggestive of El Nino. Finally, we can say that something in the atmosphere, the pressure pattern, is starting. The warming waters in the Pacific are finally starting to have some effect on the pressure in the atmosphere, and that started to be reflected in these numbers. That's a good sign. And of course, here's the 30-day running average mapped over the past couple of years. Notice we thought we had a little El Nino in 2012. Did not materialize, but then finally in about January or so, we started having a major drop in the Southern Oscillation Index in the Pacific Ocean. Kelvin wave formation kind of went really good for about 3 months, kind of backed off a little bit, and now we're back in the game. We're back down at about minus 10. The question is, what's it going to do for the next month or two? And that's about all we need to really get us over the hump. Let's keep digging. Surface level wind anomalies. What we are looking for is westerly anomalies. This is differences from normal for this time of year. Okay, notice some westerly anomalies currently occurring. Now this chart is at the 850 millibar level, up about 4,500 feet, but it's supposed to be a good representation of what's happening at the surface. Westerly anomalies of course help support the formation of Kelvin waves. Certainly easterly anomalies do not. They actually are enhanced trades, and that's suggestive of La Nina. Continued westerly anomalies make Kelvin waves and suggestive of El Nino. Okay, so as we go through this, westerly anomalies, a little bit of east here on the date line, roll it down, current, and then light easterly anomalies. But is the westerly anomalies here, and specifically between about 130, 135 east and about the date line, or even over to 170. So this is a hint maybe that something's going to be coming. We look a week out, and a much larger area of westerly anomalies are forecast in association with tropical development here. This is suggestive, of course, if one's going to believe a model out 7 days, of a legitimate westerly wind burst, especially with the tropical coupling of it. So something to watch for. This could help really support Kelvin wave development in the week or weeks to come. Looking on to the east, just pretty much light easterly anomalies here, but kind of a neutral pattern otherwise. And then going out a week beyond that, this is outgoing long wave radiation anomalies. So these sort of colors, very light, suggestive of the inactive phase of the MJO. Okay, more reflection off the ocean surface, high pressure, light reflection, sun reflection, and then sort of falling into a neutral pattern, this per the statistical model. And what's really interesting now is the dynamic model is basically showing the same thing, a dead neutral pattern. Now, if El Nino were forming, this is exactly what one would expect. No MJO at all, no inactive phase, no active phase, just sort of this dead neutral pattern with westerly anomalies, or at least neutral anomalies, winds here in that one area that we talked about from about 140 to about 170 west. So, and that's what these models now finally suggest. They've been hinting for weeks and weeks of inactive phase and easterly winds. It never happens. It hadn't happened for almost 3 months now, even though the models say, but now the models, for whatever reason, seem to be getting a grasp on reality. And if you really want to stretch it out, here's the 40-day model. Shows so this is at the jet stream level. The yellows, oranges are areas that are not supportive of precipitation, presumably the inactive phase. So by about the 1st of October, whatever little inactive phase is in the upper atmosphere is gone. Then you get into this, basically this blotchy pattern, nothing going on, classic El Nino kind of setup here, just nothing happening, a dead neutral pattern. So all this is kind of suggesting that maybe we are finally over the hump. Sea surface temperature anomalies. These are differences from normal for this time of year. And basically, nothing has changed here for several weeks. We actually had some cool water in this area in July. That's all gone. That was associated with what's called the upwelling phase of Kelvin waves, and we'll get into Kelvin waves in a minute. But basically, when you have westerly anomalies and warm water in this part, then basically this warm water starts migrating to the east, but at depth, down about 150 meters. You get like a pocket of warm water. It traverses the whole width of the Pacific Ocean on the equator and then starts gurgling up off here, or even in this region. And what we've seen now is warm anomalies starting to build it right in here. And this is what they call the Nino 3.4 region, the area that is really responsible for having the greatest impact on the atmosphere, specifically from it's like 170 west and just a couple of degrees either side of the equator to about 120 right in here. And if you look real close, you notice 1 degree anomalies. And that's all it takes to get you El Nino, even a half a degree for 3 months. So that's occurring. Of course, lots of warm water piled up all across the North Pacific, and even some light warm anomalies down here near New Zealand. Water temperatures unbelievably warm in Northern California for this time of year, and actually have been that way for almost 2 months now. The only time that ever happens is during El Nino, only because the normal high pressure that sits here off of Northern California basically dies out. Trades, the northerly winds disappear. You get even a southerly flow. Surface water temperatures start warming, no upwelling, and then you're primed. You have lots of fuel here in the ocean. All you need is a couple of low pressure systems blowing off Japan. They hit the warm water, all the warm moisture in the air, and they just supercharge, and then you get storms. And already we're starting to see that in some of the charts that we looked at earlier. So relatively speaking, no big change, the warming pattern building right in this region. Here's another way to look at it. This is actual, so these are actual water temperatures and wind speeds. These are anomalous water temperatures and anomalous wind direction and speed. Notice a little bit here of westerly anomalies starting to show up, but this is running a day behind, so we would expect to see these westerly arrows building in the days to come. And if the model's right, a week out, we should see maybe some arrows in that size coming from the west. Also notice 1 degree anomalies, a little bit north of the equator here, but half a degree anomalies filling the Nino 3.4 region. Here we go, right here, 120 west to 170 west coupled, so just put a box right around it. Half a degree everywhere, 1 degree anomalies, and much warmer water at the surface here. This is where the west anomalies are supposed to develop. This could be yet another Kelvin wave developing. Next, subsurface anomalies. This is what really matters. So let's take a look at this chart. Most of you probably have the drill down by now. Series of buoys strung across the equator. This is the Galapagos here. far west Pacific here. We're looking down at depth, down 100 meters, 200 meters, cross-section of the Pacific Ocean right on the equator. These little X's are sensors on the buoy strings, the TAO buoy array, and notice more of them are turning active as NOAA gets ships out there and gets these guys turned on. Due to funding cuts from the recession, a lot of stuff fell into disrepair. They have money now and they're back at work, thank goodness, and just in time. The key part of this chart here, 1 degree anomalies. See that? The entire way across the Pacific. And a couple little pockets here of lesser, but basically this is the Kelvin wave pathway right here, and it is this pocket here of warmer water, 2 degrees above normal with a core to 3 degrees. That is a Kelvin wave that has been generated in July and August by westerly anomalies, working its way and almost on the verge of impacting the Galapagos. But notice also, the channel remains open here and plenty of warm water in effect. Here's another way to look at it, a different model, but basically the same thing. This is a little bit, probably a better model in terms of just showing what's going on. Notice this large pocket of 2 degree anomalies with a 3 degree core. So right here is about 90 degrees west, the Galapagos Islands. Notice this little tongue of warm water just starting to trickle in there, but the bigger part of the Kelvin wave is here. Our expectation is the leading edge of this guy is going to start hitting, in about the next 10 to 15 days, and then we should start seeing water temperatures really warming up around the Galapagos off of Peru, and also then being caught up by light trades and carried into the Nino 3.4 region. So up like this and then across the Pacific like that. Also notice here's the channel, more westerly anomalies here. They push the warm water down to depth and then it all bleeds across here. This is kind of interesting too. We're not sure that this is directly attributable to westerly anomalies, but if it were to get sucked into this pile, it is another large reservoir of warm water that would help feed the pattern. Satellite data here, JSON-2 satellite, it sorts out, gets rid of all the significant wave heights, just shows you variations in normal for this time of year of the absolute height of the ocean. Higher than normal suggests warm water at depth. That is, warm water at depth expands and causes the ocean's surface to sort of roll up a little, rise up a little. Notice this. This is really maps out the Kelvin wave quite well. Right up to, what is that, about 105 or so west. Here's the Galapagos. It's working its way there. So this is the Kelvin wave in flight. What is really interesting is this large pool of warmer water at depth here, just waiting to make its way across too. And finally, this chart, really like this one. So this shows over time, October last year, warm water, upper ocean heat anomalies, upper 300 meters of the ocean. You just see the Kelvin wave, boom, go blasting the whole way across the Pacific. Here's 140 west, here's the 140 east over here. Here is the Galapagos Islands here. So actually there was one Kelvin wave here. You see the last tail of it? Upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave, cooler temperatures. Bigger Kelvin wave, October last year, make it the whole way across, upwelling phase. The massive Kelvin wave generated January, February, March, arriving in April, May, June, upwelling phase. Here we go. Here's the next Kelvin wave, makes it to about 105 as we are right now. This is per, we can show that here, September 15th. I actually can't get it in the frame. Here we go, September 15th. But what is really interesting, they're showing one sort of weak Kelvin wave, but then there's another pool here starting to develop. And that's why we're saying maybe there's a second Kelvin wave in flight here. It hasn't started working its way. It would be down like here, and maybe it's just more like a continuation of this one. And again, this is not anything like the big one or even the one before it, but still just a continued steady warm push. That's all we're really looking for. And finally, the forecast from the CFS V2 model for the Nino 3.4 region. Again, we talked about where that region is. That's where you really monitor El Nino. Notice they're saying water temperatures, on average, half a degree above normal by October. I think we're already there. In fact, pretty much we are. There you go. You can see it. That's the September time frame. So we're there already. And the interesting part is, and this is presumably associated with the incoming Kelvin wave, that temperatures will rise up to 1 degree above normal. That's certainly El Nino territory. But what's really interesting about this chart, so typically you'd see the temperatures spike in about January and then slowly start dribbling off as you get into the springtime. notice it really doesn't dribble off at all. The thought is that maybe, just maybe, and this is probably wishful thinking, that this might end up being a multi-year event, that this is not what we would call a strong El Nino, maybe even a Modoki El Nino, okay, which is an El Nino, sort of El Nino, but that would be great, because what we really want to see is not just this big spike of energy, this winter goes nuts, and then everything goes back to La Nina, because that's what always happens after El Nino. You fall into a La Nina pattern, you're back into high pressure, no rain, and the surf pattern basically gets lousy. But what is really good is if you have this sort of a multi-year thing where it doesn't really quite get into El Nino, it sort of does the Modoki thing, and then you get a big spike either 2 or 3 years down the road. And that sort of is what the model is hinting at. Way too early to start even making guesses around that, but a tantalizing little clue maybe of what's to come and why the ocean and why this El Nino is kind of just fluttering along. But you cannot deny the fact that, one, there was a massive shift in the globe. How would you call it? The pattern come January of this year, when that massive Kelvin wave was developed and massive westerly wind bursts. And then this entire summer, virtually no north winds down California, or even for Hawaii, trades much lighter than normal. Water temperatures way above normal. So something, there's a tectonic shift in the warm, or in the temperature balance between the ocean and the atmosphere that appears to be going on at the moment. You know, we're not talking doom or gloom. This is all normal kind of stuff for El Nino, but just trying to give a sense of what's to come for the future. And at this point in time, we have become much more favorably disposed to some sort of a longer-term warm event starting to go on, and that we've finally broken the ice for the multi-year cold pattern that we've been in. So, something to look for, something to hope for. All right, so to wrap things up, it looks like for sure there's some sort of gale activity scheduled off the U.S. West Coast in Tuesday time frame. Some larger kind of a swell is possible, maybe a little bit of storminess associated with it, but it looks like we're into fall now, and multiple smaller systems forecast behind that, one targeting Hawaii, and of course the southern hemi still looks like it's somewhat active, with more surf expected there for breaks with southern exposure. So now, notice we don't have the ads anymore from Kandui Resort and Vunabaka.com. They are, you know, into the down season, so that's good. But we wanted to take a minute and say thank you to them. They've been a great supporter of us, and we really appreciate their sponsorship. And still, go check them out. You can always start making reservations for the following season. It's well worth it. In the meantime, we'll have the Google ad thing at the front of this sector until perhaps another sponsor comes along. So thanks for watching. We'll do this again next week, same time, same channel. And in the meantime, go get some surf, have some fun. Things are looking good.